Okay, we're going to go ahead and start, and I want to first thank, of course, our city manager and our budget team for being here. I especially want to just thank. I know that we're streaming this, so for any community members that are watching the budget presentation, thank you for watching, and of course to any members of the press that are here as well, thank you all for being here. We're going to start with the budget presentation in just a minute. I just want to briefly just say before we start that obviously there's a lot happening as it relates to the pandemic that is concerning to the city. The number of new cases, particularly as it relates to the Delta variant and the cases we're seeing in LA County, as well as here at the city, is very concerning to the health department. Everyone should be aware that Dr. Davis yesterday put in place and is putting in place a new masking mandate that mirrors the LA County mandate that will also be in place. So we want to make sure that, just to remind folks, to please get vaccinated. It is free, it is safe, and it is the absolute best thing you can do to not just help keep healthy for yourself and your family, but to keep others healthy around you. So please get vaccinated. It's available in the city and in many other places. So thank you for that. So let me go ahead and start. And we're going to, obviously we're presenting today the FY22 city budget, which we do every single year. And like every year, this is always a partnership. The budget team does a great job, and the city manager does a great job of presenting this to the council as well, and it's presented to me as well, and we're going to discuss that today. So let me just go over a few things. The budget's total is about $3 billion. It does reflect the city's recovery from what is the largest public health crisis that we've ever had in our lifetime here at the city of Long Beach. And I think the key piece of this budget is that the budget includes no cuts, there's no deficit, and the reserves are replenished. And before the American Rescue Plan, which we're going to talk about, came forward, we were obviously expecting, again, a very serious budget environment because of the just a combination of deficit, loss of tax revenue, enormous expenses going up across the board as it relates to health and everything else. And so because of federal and state funds, we're in a much better place. This budget takes into account the city's racial equity and reconciliation plan, and it also includes, for the first time, the Measure US funds that voters passed at 57% in November of 2020, which you're going to see. It's also just important to note that this year's budget, separate of Measure US, which is new, and the American Rescue Plan and Long Beach Recovery Act funds, this year's budget is very similar and reflects essentially last year's budget. And so with some minor modifications, it is very similar to last year's budget. Again, there aren't additional cuts, and we do eliminate the deficit completely, and we replenish the reserves, which is very important to me and to a lot of us here at the city. So the Long Beach Recovery Act, we know that the federal and state funds have made it possible to avoid budget reductions during a recovery year, and it's going to take us this year to continue the recovery. The Recovery Act brings in almost $250 million of federal and state funds into Long Beach. And as we know, on March 16th, the council approved the Long Beach Recovery Act that we presented to the council. So within the budget, on top of this kind of flat year that reflects last year's, we are, of course, adding the recovery money, which is about $64 million in economic recovery, $108 in healthy and safe community funds, and about $77 million to secure the city's future as it relates to furloughs and deficits, and I'll discuss that in just a minute. The economic recovery piece is about $64 million. It includes protections for businesses and nonprofits, direct business support, about $21 million, additional funds for the airport, which I know suffered greatly during the pandemic, economic inclusion funds to ensure that everyone is recovering equitably. There's about $4 million in our Clean Long Beach initiative, which we just discussed at the council this last week. And that, of course, is to double the amount of clean teams on the street and ensure that we are doing everything we can to maintain a refuse service that's appropriate for neighborhoods and people are getting the service that they need. And of course, there's a variety of other programs in place for the economic recovery piece. Under the health and safety piece is about $108 million, certainly the largest. There is about $16 million there for direct COVID-19 response as it relates to public health. We have a bunch of resources in there for basic needs around food, diapers, access to resources for children. There's physical and health equity money in there. We do have about $2.8 million for childcare, particularly for single parents and parents that are struggling. And we also have violence prevention money, which is a variety of park programs and midnight basketball programs, funding, working with community organizations to do violence prevention in parks. And of course, there's homelessness money in there at 10.9, the Justice Fund. That's an additional amount of money that's on top of what's in the budget. And housing support and language access is all in there on top of what's already in the budget. And as it relates to securing our city's future, this is a key part for the city to stabilize. The $35.2 million is essentially the combination of the deficit that we wiped out in the budget and the furloughs that we also eliminated for city employees to get everyone back to work and to get city services back in place. And so that's the 35.2 you see there, the combination of those two. And then of course we depleted, we have emergency reserves at the city. We depleted our emergency reserves during the pandemic. We never do that, obviously. And so we are using the resources to replenish the reserves for a future emergency. There's probably nothing more important than that in this budget. And if we had another emergency, at least we know that we'd be able to meet that crisis. There's also a variety, and Mr. Modica is going to go through the details like he does every year of the budget in just a few minutes. But there is a variety of community investments, many of which have been discussed by many members of the community that I just wanted to, and I'm just highlighting and pointing out a few. You'll see them all throughout the budget. This includes a significant increase to the health department. There's about $700,000 in additional language access money in this budget on top of language access money spread across departments. There is $600,000 for the Long Beach Justice Fund, which I believe is the largest amount that we've had for the Justice Fund, and we're going to grow that as we move forward. We have $1.8 million for digital inclusion. There's a research money there to research community land trusts, which is very interesting to me and a lot of folks in the community. And there is a lot of investments for youth, particularly money from the Measure US that is going to be discussed by Mr. Modica in just a few minutes. Again, I just want to just note that unlike, I think, most every year, we present, there is a lot of recommendations and a lot of changes to the budget, and oftentimes if there's a deficit that year, there might be cuts, or if we have revenues might be in a different place, there's a lot of additions. That is not the case this year. This is very much last year's budget with some minor modifications, but then these one-time infusion of dollars from the federal and state government. And that's what you're going to see in the presentation from Mr. Modica. Oh, and one more, I should add one more thing. Let me also just add, and I think I did not mention it, maybe a week or two ago, the city manager had mentioned, and I had mentioned at a police department briefing, that the city manager was going to present a safety recovery plan for the city. That recovery plan, I believe the city manager sent to me and the city council this morning or earlier today. That will be, and I believe will be public also today. So we'll release the budget. That will also be public later today. And that's not being discussed in this presentation because it's not part of next year's budget. Those funds are coming out of, from what I understand, from funds out of this year that are surplus in some of the other funds. And so they're not part of this, but that safety recovery plan will also be public today. And the council just got it, I believe, this morning. So with that, I'll turn this over to Mr. Modica.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I'll start with essentially the same message as the mayor said it pretty well. The FY22 budget, we essentially tried to do a status quo budget from FY21. We didn't want to go backwards. We didn't want to impact our departments and all the services we provide as we're trying to recover. And so that was a really big focus for us. Our budget is $3 billion with 37 fund groups, made up 126 different funds and 23 departments. And our main philosophy this year was to really maintain services despite all those fiscal challenges. And of course, our emphasis is also on pandemic recovery. I think you've all covered very well the amount of unprecedented challenge that we as a society and as a city and a community and an organization have all been dealing with for the past 16 months. It's been unprecedented from an operational perspective at the city, financially as well. We've really focused on minimizing impacts of the pandemic through this to our community and our business and our residents. It certainly has strained our city resources and diverted a lot of our staff capacity for those missions, as well as our financial resources. And then there were other challenges throughout the year, including a number of First Amendment demonstrations and civil unrest, and of course systemic racial inequality in our society that we're addressing. But we've had a lot of accomplishments. We could spend a lot of time today going over the accomplishments. We just picked just a couple just to highlight, but there's certainly many, many more. But we really focused on safety and health during the pandemic. We've done things like a COVID relief payment program where you have interest and penalty-free payment options for our businesses and for parking citations. We have the emergency rental assistance program, something we've never done before in our history, and with $51.4 million to support renters and landlords. Long Beach BizCare was launched to really support our businesses through free one-on-one in-person support. We've had a number of policies to suspend charging late fees for utility customers. We've suspended our shutoffs of our utilities for non-payment and not really gone through our collection efforts to help everyone through this pandemic. We've had a really successful Open Streets initiative, helping our businesses survive and our restaurants and get through some of the shutdowns of last year and continuing now as they recover. 120 parklets and over 200 other uses of parking lots on private property. We've expanded services for people experiencing homelessness, Project Room Key, Project Home Key, a brand new 125-room homeless shelter, our first year-round shelter. At the airport, one of our tenants completed construction of the largest solar energy project in our history. We've transitioned to programs online, especially at our library. We did contactless pickup service, free printing, tech-to-go, Chromebooks, and MiFi lending. We did a strategic plan for youth, which really informed a lot of the budget that you're going to see later. And we've repaired potholes, trees, tree stumps, and we've also been ranked as a top 10 digital city. I do also want to point out that this city can really invest federal and state dollars very wisely and do it expeditiously and really target the areas that they need to go. We proved that through the CARES Act. We were given $40 million and 6 months to invest. And we hit that. We passed every single financial audit of those dollars. And these are just some of the examples of the things that we were able to accomplish. From hotspots to care kits to supporting families with diapers and formula, early childhood education, repaired homes. We housed the homeless. We delivered grocery boxes. And I just wanted to quickly touch on some of those. So the Long Beach Recovery Act really is critical for us to help maintain our budget. The council was one of the very first cities anywhere that I'm aware of that came out and adopted a plan early on to say, here's roughly how we want to invest these dollars, and we're refining that in the budget today. And so it targeted those 3 areas the mayor covered: economic recovery, health and safety community, safe community, and securing our city's future. And that helped us resolve that $30 million general fund shortfall. Just to put that in perspective, if we had to go through reductions this year, we'd be looking at likely 145 city positions that we would have to no longer have available for service, which is a very large impact. We still have work to do. We'll get to that later in the presentation, and we really need to be looking to the future and working on those budget balancing options in FY22 to get ready for FY23. And so funding from that Recovery Act comes from state, federal, and county. We put those all together as one big plan. It actually has gone up in the budget that were released. The one that we did back in February or in March was $235.5 million. It has now gone up to $249.3, particularly as we get more money for tenant assistance and for health services. But we've also had some reductions. We had about a $17.9 million reduction in the pot of money that is kind of the most flexible, that funds most of the programs. So we've had to make some adjustments there. In the budget, you'll see that we preserve all the programs that the council talked about in March. We had to make some funding reductions just to fit that $17.9 million target. Any programs under 300,000 didn't receive any reduction because that would be pretty hard on a small project. Anything between 300,000 and 2 million took a 10% reduction, and anything over 2 million, as they can absorb larger reductions and still have viable programs, took a 20% reduction. And then we also reduced money from our reserve, 6.5 million, to try to lighten the impact on some of those other programs to the community. Just to put it in perspective, $249 million to spend in the course of 2 to 3 years is larger than a lot of California cities' budgets. So we need to staff up for that. We need to make sure we have a team that can support. And in all of those programs, we have a team that charges their cost to make sure that we are doing this effectively. We have a 3-year staffing and administration plan. And then we're using a function in the federal law called indirect funding option, which allows us to lower audit requirements, but we're still going to declare put out a very detailed plan on every dollar that's spent, how it lines up with Recovery Act goals, and make sure we're reporting on that regularly. In our framework of reconciliation, that is still very much reflected in this budget. That was adopted in August 2020. A number of things have happened over the past year, including moving the Office of Equity. We now have increased staff in our Office of Equity. We have equity champions in each department. We've done Racial Equity 101 trainings. And one of the really large impacts this year has been our Vaccine Equity and Outreach Subcommittee, working with all of our nonprofits to really work on how do we focus vaccine outreach and make sure we're getting to people that really need to hear from us on how to get vaccinated. Long Beach Recovery Act supports reconciliation. These are just some of the items in the Recovery Act, just to remind you. We do youth academic programming at all of our libraries. We've got youth life coaching and mentoring. We've expanded our Be Safe programs. We have our intervention team that we started in Washington neighborhood and looking to expand that. We've got a reentry pilot program, which helps people incarcerated and reentering back into our society. We're investing in economic empowerment zones. The mayor mentioned community land trust research and investment. We're providing digital inclusion, mental health crisis response pilot, which we hope to launch in 2022, and our youth workforce development programs. Normally, I get to come here and talk to you about a long list of one-time investments that we're making when we get one-time dollars, big strategic initiatives, but those dollars weren't really here this year. So again, our priority was to basically move forward from last year to this year. We did not have a lot of extra one-time dollars, but these are really the 4 major changes in the budget I wanted to highlight. We have a new diversity recruitment, mentorship, and partnership program in the police department that was funded within their own resources. They moved some things around to really help foster a workforce that reflects their community and the diverse community. We're continuing that same effort in the fire department through $250,000 in one-times. That had been in a previous budget. Elections and redistricting funds, those are 2 big charter requirements. We've set aside $2.18 million to allocate for that work. And then we've had a couple of items that were long planned in the past that we knew were going to come due this year. And so those have been in our financial projections all along. 2 of them, one of them is a new park, Wrigley Greenbelt, and the other is we're building out here, right behind you, a brand new Lincoln Park that'll be open in 2022, and we need to fund both the maintenance and the programming of that. The one area that is new in the budget is Measure US. That is a specific funding source that voters voted on to really invest in 3 areas. It's youth, it's health, and it's climate. And we've delivered on all 3 of those. The council was very clear they wanted to see something new called a youth fund, which will be within kind of a Measure US designation and really invest some of those new dollars in youth. This is brand new, so the city staff have been listening a lot to all the different ideas. We put together our plan of what we think meets most of those criteria, but I'm sure this will get a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, changes at the council level as we look to kind of hone this brand new program. So the youth fund is the vast majority of Measure US. It's $918,000. A big portion of that, $200,000, will be for direct community-based grants where people can apply directly to us for grants that support their youth organizations. We'll have a youth ambassador program that was highly successful under CARES Act, where we bring on youth, have them help out in parks, and they get a great life skills. They help us with a number of things important to the community, and then they move on and we hire new youth. We're going to be investing in STEAM ecosystem programming, which is a lot of science and technology in our libraries. Youth mental health programming will support the annual Long Beach Youth Summit, and we'll also have lots of data and communication efforts on supporting our Youth Commission and getting that information out. In the area of community health, $155,000. These are two key areas. One is supporting our equity office and our health equity and racial equity work, and the other is the older adult program. This has been one that had been funded just through one time. This is now funded permanently through Measure US. And then we have our climate adaptation plan that has a number of different implementation steps. We were able to dedicate $243,000 towards fieldwork programs with our trees, hiring youth there as well, helping our community-based organizations with grants for farming and community gardens and tools, and also a new electric lawn equipment program.
Let me add something there, Tom, real quick. Before we go, just want to add, so Measure US is a annual, obviously, revenue source. So this is the staff's recommendations for year one, and then of course the resources will come in every single year, depending on what the evaluation is of oil, and as far as the formula for oil. But let me add, though, that I think it's important to know that these are staff's recommendations for Measure US. And I think they've done a great job of kind of listening to the community and putting down in place what's important. But I also know that the council, was very engaged in this, is also going to have, and they've already mentioned, I think, to the city manager and myself, they're going to have very strong ideas about where they think the resources should be spent, and the community will as well. And so I think the council is very open to looking at this fund and ensuring that it meets the needs of those that were involved in driving the measure to success. And so I think that's just important to note also, and I think the city manager mentioned that, but I think the staff's very open to that.
And we're very supportive of that. This is brand new. We want to try to find the ideas that we can put out there as ideas, and some might be added to, some might be subtracted from as we add other priorities, and we're very open to that. So Measure A essentially continues to support all the past restorations, all the public safety maintenance, and administrative support. We also are using $2.5 million because this is a status quo budget to keep going what was in 21 and 22. We're using $2.5 million to keep Engine 17 in service for one additional year. Otherwise, that would be sunsetting in September. So that'll go through another year. We also are funding our Neighborhood Safe Streets initiative, which are dollars the police department uses on a data basis to really focus on hotspots and areas of concern in the community. For a number of years, we've been planning that this is the year that we're going to be funding our radio replacement for public safety, both police and fire. It is an antiquated system, and it is a key communication system for both departments, and that'll get funded out of Measure A. Community hospital is supported again this year, and then $20.8 million for infrastructure, which include road work and also police and fire academy, other infrastructure, and also an investment, $4 million in our ADA sidewalk and curb requirements. Our capital improvement plan, we'll be doing a specific item with the council going through the capital improvement plan in August. It's $470 million, 331 of that is the harbor, but the second largest area is mobility, utilities and mobility. $51 million into our streets and sidewalks and roads. And so the general fund budget is balanced, but it is balanced with some one-time dollars. And so that is not a structural or permanent solution. We need to address that, and the council has done that. Anytime that we have a structural imbalance, we put together a plan, and we will be doing that for FY23. That shortfall is $27 million in FY22 and $3 million in one-time, which are covered by the Recovery Act. And so we know that we're going to have to start a little earlier this year to really plan on how we're going to address that in FY23. And as with any budget, there's always unfunded needs. There's things that just, there aren't enough resources. I feel it's important to disclose the big ones and let it, put those out there and let anyone know. And those can be reviewed in the budget process. And there's also items that the council has asked for that don't always have full funding or some funding that we provide to them, so there's the ability to make those reviews and decisions. This is what the next few years look like. It's always good financial planning to look to the future and to see what we have coming. Essentially, FY22 is balanced, but the shortfall from this year gets pushed forward, so that's that $27 million. And so in the FY23, it's currently projected at $36 million, and then we have an $11 million in 24 deficit and another $9 in 25. And so these are all projections. They change. Revenues go up, revenues go down, expenses go up, expenses go down. But this is what we know today. It also assumes that we're going to win the Measure M litigation, which does look very likely right now. Sacramento just won their case, and we're substantially similar. Otherwise, this would be actually worse in FY23. And as I mentioned, we're going to start earlier to really look at some of the solutions for FY23. So that's it for the presentation. What we've done so far is we did a fiscal outlook on March 16th. We were at the Budget Oversight Committee April 20th. We've submitted the budget today. And then here's the schedule coming up all the way through August of various budget hearings and meetings. There's a number of ways the community can get involved. You can attend any of those budget hearings that we just listed. You can attend community budget meetings, and we'll have 3 of those that'll be coming out very soon. We'll have our Budget Oversight Committee meetings. We'll also have our annual survey where you can kind of tell us what are some of your ideas. And then we're also, when we're doing our community outreach, we're going to be looking and engaging people on our strategic plan to get some additional input from our long-term strategic plan. So the last thing I'll end it with is this is a city of really many accomplishments. We're a full-service city. We provide amazing services to our residents. We're also a city that doesn't shy away from challenges and attacks them head-on. And we have such an amazing workforce of dedicated employees that I can't be more proud of them for how they performed through the pandemic. Great, strong leadership from our mayor, from our city council, from all of our department heads and our citywide elected officials, and just couldn't do this without the support of our auditor, our attorney, prosecutor, city clerk, civil service director, harbor director, and water director. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, we're going to now take media questions. 1 question per element. Please announce your organization and name.
Hi, this is Haley with the Press Telegram. Given the projected shortfalls, I know you still have a year to figure this out, but I'm kind of curious if that means it's possible or likely that Long Beach could be facing cuts in next fiscal year. I don't know who would be best positioned to answer that, but.
Yeah. So at this point, it does appear likely there will have to be reductions next year. We've outlined what that amount is. The actual cuts and the solutions could be a number of things. It could be increased revenue from anything from the economy coming back to hotels coming back, that type of thing. It could be reductions in the various departments. We've got a pretty established process for how we do that type of work, and we actually started last year looking even more intensely at just what are our core service levels? It's sort of a zero-based budgeting type approach. So we started that work, and we expect that to be continuing in FY22 to get ready for FY23.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think that's right. I think every year, projections are typically just projections, and they give us a good marker of where things are at. But I think the council members will share that they wildly change from year to year, and been most often than not, the projections end up looking better over time. But sometimes, we may have to deal with some serious cuts or look at revenue, and it's just hard to tell, kind of 2 years out. So I think what we're most happy about is that we were really thinking there would be really difficult cuts this year. Every city in the country was facing horrific cuts this year, and I think that we have to note that the administration and President Biden and Congress in passing the American Rescue Plan, which turned into for us to our Long Beach Recovery Plan, absolutely changed everything about not just our budget, but I think the state budget, and which then put more resources into our budget because they got more money, and the county. When they got more resources, they also put they put additional resources into our budget. So we were absolutely now able to focus on recovery for the next year because of that federal action, which we're very grateful for.
Any further questions?
Daniel Drake with Long Beach Local News. My question is a little obscure, but are you aware of the Homeland Security operation which detained dozens of immigrants in the Long Beach Marina, which the LBPD offered support for, potentially violating the Values Act of 2018 and thusly the SB 54 of California? And if so, would this impact the LBPD budget that so much of the community has been calling for following last year's civil unrest that you mentioned earlier?
I actually don't know anything.
So that's not really a budget question, but it is, that was an operation that was not led by Long Beach Police Department. It was in our marina. It was a federally run item. I do not believe it violated the Values Act, but we can get PD to give you some additional specifics on it, and it wouldn't have any impact on the budget. So we don't have any money for any type of involvement with immigration. That's clear, and there's no budget of that in the FY22 budget or 23 budget.
And you can follow up with the JIC for any follow-up questions on that. Ma'am? I'll come right back to you.
I have a follow-up question afterward also. Philip Zonko from Q Voice News. So the health department is one of the most important service providers for the LGBTQ community in the city. But in this budget, as in previous budgets, the city does not invest in strategic LGBTQ health initiatives. Why doesn't the city prioritize structurally funding the health department with LGBTQ health initiatives?
Well, I think, and maybe you can add to that, Phil, I think that LGBTQ initiatives exist throughout the health department and throughout different initiatives that they have. I don't know the details, but I know that the health department funds and has funded, particularly prior to the pandemic, which it's shifted some of its resources, conferences, partnering with the center. There's HIV/AIDS work that happens. There's focus on gay men's health. So I
But
know
those
that
aren't city investments. Those are grant funded, correct? That's not city investments.
I don't know which ones are. I think most
Yeah.
are. I think most programs in the health department, I believe, are grant funded.
Health department's about 98% funded by grants. That's how health departments are set up. We do provide some support for homelessness and outreach that are not funded by state grants. And then we did make some investments last year in additional HIV work. That's a 2-year program that continues. And then we do expect to be able to get some additional state funding for investigating HIV and STD cases. Hopefully 1 to 2 people. That's a grant right now that we're waiting from the state to invest in.
But just to clarify, not city investments, grant funding.
They're all city investments because we get the grant funding
It's
and
not
we
city
apply
tax
for
dollars
it
is
and
what
we
I'm saying. I
then
mean, city
implement it.
tax dollars, it's not coming
They're not general fund dollars.
Okay. The follow-up question, yeah, just really quickly. The police chief has said that the department's LGBTQ liaison committee group, which was cut from the budget before 2010, possibly 2007, 2008, in the Human Rights Campaign's municipality report card, Long Beach receives points for having this group. So my question is, why is Long Beach claiming credit for a group that hasn't existed for over 6 or 7 years?
I'm not aware of what the status of the group is, to be honest, Phil. So I'd have to check the report. And
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm happy to check the report and talk to the chief. I'm not familiar with the status of the group or when it's been meeting or not meeting. I'm not.
If I
Okay.
recall that report card, it says that we should have a liaison to our LGBTQ community, and we do have that in both the police department and the mayor's office.
The
We
police
receive
department
points
does
for
not
that every
have
year.
one. The police department does not have
We
one.
can get you some answers.
I just wanted to talk to them in person was all.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to talk to the chief about that. I don't know the answer to your question.
Sorry?
I think we'd have to talk to the chief about that. I don't know the answer to your question.
Yeah. And
Okay,
we've gotten the points in the Human Relations Commission for that kind of liaison every single year. So they go through and they evaluate it, and we can share a copy of the application if you'd like to see it.
That's not accurate.
We can follow up. We'll
Sure.
follow up after with the
The
JIC.
committee group doesn't exist.
Hi, Kevin Flores from fourth.org. I've got a question for Mayor Garcia. Last February, the City Council approved a deal to forego up to $43 million in property taxes over 30 years, and in exchange, the Ocean Air building downtown would be converted into income-restricted housing. However, a memo from the consultant hired by the city found that the deal leaves Long Beach with, quote, modest affordability benefits, a financial structure that is misaligned with city interests, and a return on public investment that does not provide clear justification for participation. Do you think the city is getting a fair shake here, and do you support this program?
Well, I think the project you're talking about, that's the one that was the moderate income workforce housing project. So I think staff actually recommended that project, and I think it was passed unanimously by the city council, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know the details of every single project, but I'm assuming it was the conversion to like workforce or moderate income housing Am I? do I have
Correct,
that
yeah.
right?
So it's the building right behind you, back there, the Ocean Air. This is a brand-new program. It's a pilot program. A lot of cities were looking at it. As we do, we get pretty deep into the details, and we looked at every aspect of that transaction. There are some concerning things because it's a brand-new program, and we outlined what those are, but we also recommended that we go forward and do one pilot program with that because it does create and takes luxury apartment buildings right now and turns them into affordable housing units for a period of time. And so I do think it was a good deal to look at, and because of the affordable housing crisis, we did recommend, though, that we pause and not do any more of those until we're able to really dive deeper into that program and figure out if there's tweaks that make it a little bit more advantageous for both people who are going to be living there and also for the city and property tax.
Just a quick follow-up for the city manager. The consultant report that I'm referring to was excluded from the documents attached to the council agenda when this Ocean Air deal was approved. Why was the consultant's report kept from the public?
We summarized it, just like anytime we get reports. Those are all public documents. If anyone wants it, they can have it. We did about 12 pages, if I remember, of what was in that like 30-page or 40-page and disclosed the major topics and stuff. So if anybody wants to see a copy of that, it's available.
Well, thank you all very much. Thank you.